For 20 years, the richest men in France lent their money to a locked safe. Not to a business, not to a bank. To a heavy iron box, sealed shut with wax, sitting in the bedroom of a house on one of the grandest avenues in Paris. Everyone knew what was inside it. 100 million francs in bonds and securities, the inheritance of an American millionaire, waiting for a court case to end. Bankers lent against it. Financiers lent against it. Ordinary people handed over their savings for a share of it. The whole of respectable Paris arranged itself around that sealed box and the fortune it was said to hold. There was only one problem. In all those years, nobody had ever opened it. When the state finally forced the lid in front of a crowd, the 100 million francs were not there. What was there was an old newspaper, a single Italian coin, and one trouser button. The woman who owned that safe was named Thérèse Humbert, and the empty box was not her failure. It was her masterpiece. She was born Thérèse d'Aurignac in 1856 in a village called Aussonne, near Toulouse in the south of France. Her family was not grand. Her father, Guillaume, had been a foundling, a child left without a name and later given one. There were 7 children in the house and little money to feed them. What she had from early on was a different kind of talent. Not for saving money or making it, but for making people believe that money was coming, that it was already hers in all but the paperwork and would arrive any day now. Stay on that for a second, because it is the whole of her in one line. Long before Paris ever heard her name, she had learned the single lesson that would carry her entire career. People do not lend against what you have. They lend against what they believe you are about to have. Give a person a future worth waiting for, and they will pay you for it in the present. Everything she would later build, the mansion, the sealed safe, the 20 years of borrowed millions, grew out of that one quiet idea. All she needed was a stage large enough to use it on, and she found that stage the ordinary way. She married into it. Her husband was a young man named Frédéric Humbert, and Frédéric came with something worth far more than a dowry. He came with a father. His father was Gustave Humbert, and Gustave was not an ordinary man. He was a professor of Roman law, a senator of the French Republic, and in 1882 he became the Minister of Justice of France, the man at the very top of the French legal system. Later, he would run the nation's Court of Accounts, the body that audited the state itself. Think about what that meant for a woman whose whole fortune was a story about a disputed will. Her father-in-law was the living face of French law. When Thérèse spoke about lawsuits and legacies and sealed documents, she did not sound like a schemer up from the provinces. She sounded like a daughter of the family that ran the courts. And Frédéric was no bystander. He was a trained lawyer himself and had served as his own father's chief of staff during the ministry. That name did more than open doors. It vouched for her. To every banker and every notary in Paris, it said that this was a woman from the very heart of the establishment. And you do not interrogate the heart of the establishment. You lend to it, and you feel honored to be asked. Now she needed a source for the fortune. Not a French one, which could be checked, but something far away, across an ocean hard to trace. So she invented a man. The story she told went like this. Some years earlier, traveling by train, she had heard groaning from the next compartment. She went in and found an elderly American, a millionaire named Robert Henry Crawford, in the grip of a heart attack. She nursed him, revived him, and saved his life. He never forgot it. And when he died in 1881, his will named her among his heirs and left her a fortune of 100 million francs. There was, of course, no Robert Henry Crawford, no train, no heart attack, no will. But it was a beautiful invention because it came with a delay built into it. The will, she explained, was being contested. Crawford had 2 nephews, Henry and Robert, who swore the money was rightly theirs. Until the courts settled that fight, The whole inheritance had to stay locked away, untouched. That was the genius of it. A fortune too tangled in law to spend was also a fortune too tangled in law to disprove. All she had to do was keep the case alive. And a lawsuit, unlike a safe, can be kept alive for a very long time. To make it real, she gave the fortune a body, a safe. In her grand house on the Avenue de la Grande Armée, Thérèse installed a heavy fireproof safe and made a small ceremony of filling it. She brought in a magistrate to act as a witness, and before his eyes she placed the Crawford documents and securities inside. Then the safe was locked, sealed with hot wax, and the magistrate attested that it had all been done properly and in good order. The procedure was sound and legal. And there it sat, sealed, witnessed, official. No one was allowed to open it because the terms of the imaginary lawsuit forbade anyone touching the estate until the case was won. That was the entire trick, folded into one object. The safe could not be opened without breaking the law, and so it was never opened, and so no one ever learned that the 100 million francs inside it did not exist. To the bankers of Paris, that box was as good as gold, better in a way. Gold can be weighed and tested. The safe only had to be believed. And against that belief, quietly at first, Thérèse Humbert began to borrow. What followed was not a single loan. It was a machine, and it ran for the better part of 20 years. She borrowed against the safe and used the money to live like the heiress she claimed to be, with the mansion, the servants, and a salon that pulled in politicians and men of influence. Then she borrowed again from new lenders to pay the interest owed to the old ones. Each fresh loan bought a little more silence and a little more time. The totals are murky, and honestly, that is part of the story. She is reckoned to have handled something like 60 million francs of other people's money, and by some counts, the borrowing across all those years ran well into the hundreds of millions. Keeping it going took more than nerve. It took a cast. The lawsuit needed those two Crawford nephews to look real, so two of her own brothers, Romain and Émile, stepped into the parts and played the American heirs in the French courts. Lawyers were hired to fight the case that could never end. Documents were forged. A whole fictional legal battle was staged, year after year, so the safe would always have a reason to stay shut. And for nearly 2 decades it held. Paris did not merely believe her. Paris was invested in her, quite literally. A city that has lent you a fortune has every reason to keep on believing. By the 1890s, the machine was straining. The old debts had grown too heavy to cover with new private loans alone. So Thérèse did what a certain kind of swindler always does when the first scheme runs short. She started a second one. In 1893, she launched a company, a life annuity and pension fund called the Rente Viagère. On its face, it was a respectable place for careful people to put their money and draw an income in old age. In truth, it was a funnel. The savings that ordinary Parisians paid in were used to quiet the wealthy creditors who were pressing hardest on the old Crawford debt. This is the part of the story that stops being clever and turns cruel. The bankers and financiers she cheated could, most of them, survive the loss. But the Rente Viagère reached into a different pocket. Clerks, shopkeepers, widows with a little put by and a great deal to lose. They handed their futures to a name they trusted, and that name was spending it to plug the holes in a fortune that had never existed. Thousands of them would end up ruined, and the whole leaning tower of it now rested on one thing above all others, that nobody ever insisted on opening the safe. The question that finally killed her was a simple one. If there is 100 million francs in the safe, why do you keep borrowing? Why not open it, pay everyone, and be free? For years, her name and her father-in-law's name had been enough to keep that question politely unasked. But in time, it was asked out loud. The newspaper Le Matin began to look hard at the Humbert fortune, and to print what the salons only whispered, that the safe should be opened, that this emperor of finance might have no clothes at all. Then the pressure found a crack. A banker named Girard in the town of Elbeuf had lent heavily to Thérèse over the years. When his own affairs turned bad and he called in what she owed, she brushed him aside. Ruined and in despair, Girard shot himself. A death like that could not be waved away. It forced the authorities toward the one act the entire fraud had been built to prevent: to look inside. In 1901, her creditors took her to court. In 1902, a Paris court ordered the famous safe opened, and Thérèse Humbert, heiress of the century, did the only thing left to her. With her husband and her brothers, she ran out of France and across the border into Spain. In 1902, with the family already fled, they opened the safe. By then, the whole city knew what hung on it, and a crowd gathered to see the fortune that had ruled French finance for a generation. By some accounts, close to 10,000 people pressed in to watch. The seals were broken, the lock was forced. The heavy door of the box that all of Paris had leant against was finally swung open. Inside was almost nothing: an old newspaper, a single Italian coin, one trouser button. By some tellings, the small rubbish differs: a brick, an English halfpenny, this trinket or that. But the truth of it was the same whichever version you heard. There were no bonds, there were no securities. There was no 100 million francs, and there never had been. The greatest fortune in France was a locked box of trash, and the whole tower of loans and lawsuits and pensions had been built on top of it. Every banker who had lent against that box, every clerk who had bought into the rente viagère, every lawyer and notary who had sworn to the sealed estate, all of them had been staring for 20 years at the same piece of theater. A locked door and a story about what was behind it. The Humberts were arrested in Madrid in December of 1902 and brought back to France to answer for it. The trial, through the summer of 1903, was a sensation. Newspapers across Europe and America carried every day of it. She was defended by Fernand Labori, one of the most famous advocates of the age, the same lawyer who had stood up for Alfred Dreyfus and for Émile Zola. And through all of it, Thérèse never broke. She insisted to the very end that the 100 millions were real, and that a secret in her keeping would prove her innocence. The courtroom watched her hold that line with something close to wonder. The audience chiefly amused by the coolness of her assumptions. On the 22nd of August, 1903, the verdict came. Thérèse and her husband, Frédéric, were each sentenced to 5 years of hard labor. Her brothers, the men who had played the phantom nephews, drew 3 years and 2. History has settled on a plain name for the whole affair: the swindle of the century. After her release, Thérèse Humbert vanished from the record almost as cleanly as her fortune had. Some say she sailed for America and died quietly in Chicago. Others place her, years later, an old woman living poorly in Paris, speaking to no one. The sources cannot agree, and there is something fitting in that. She had spent her life as a story people told about money that was not there. In the end, she became a story herself. But the real lesson of the empty safe was never about her. She did not steal that fortune by cracking a vault. She stole it by convincing an entire city not to look inside one. The bankers, the aristocrats, reportedly even an empress, all lent against a sealed box because a great name told them to, and because everyone else already had. Nobody wanted to be the one who asked. The safe was empty the whole time. What filled it was them. The file on Thérèse Humbert of Aussonne, heiress to nothing. For 20 years, the richest woman in France. Case closed.